Good evening and welcome to the Taco Society Presents. Thank you for having us back. This is our third episode with all of us here.
All of us.
All of us. I mean,
Partially.
you too. Yeah.
I'm all here.
We're back from Anticon. You may have seen a reading last week by the New England Horror Writers Association. But we're back from Anticon, and we're going to talk a little bit about it before we get into tonight's program. Wasn't that a blast? Wasn't that a good time?
Anticon was awesome. Anticon right in Portsmouth, and what can you say? It's always a blast. That place is always hopping with amazing writers and great books.
The readings, the authors, and the fans. It was just, out of all four Anthicons, this was definitely the best. And we have to thank Tim Deal, Mark Worley, Johnny Morse. I want to say Morse, right?
Yep. Yeah.
We want to thank all three of them. They put on one hell of a show, and we can't wait till next year.
Yeah, amazing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and the work that Tim does with Shroud Publishing is just amazing, and to think that a person who is running his own publishing company can work with the people who are working with him, and then invite all these other people from other publishing companies and their writers and everything. It's just it's a wonderful open atmosphere.
It's amazing. Well, you look at the time. I mean, the time that takes for him to run Shroud. Plus, he was overseas for I think it was 18 months.
Yeah.
But he managed to get all that pushed aside a little bit, and then run Anthicon with Johnny and Mark, and he just did a fantastic job. I'm just going to go over one of the highlights for me was seeing the Great Old Ones reading, and that's Phil's group, if you might remember from the last time. Phil, who are some of those remarkable readers during that presentation that read?
Well, yes, Tony, the Great Old Ones Publishing hour, basically, and we had a number of folks, both local New Englanders as well as from out of the New England area that read. One of our highlights, in my opinion, was M.J. Preston. He's a Canadian author. He actually does ice truck driving as a job, but he's a writer as well. And he was there, and he read. And then we had Christy Peterson Schoonover. She's from Connecticut, and she has a book called Bad Apple that was nominated for a Pushcart Award. But she read one of her stories from the anthology Bugs, which was great. And then we had other folks such as Gregory Norris. He's from Berlin, New Hampshire. April Hawks, who's out of Maine. We had
The Dents?
The Dent sisters. Yes, Roxanne specifically, she actually read. And then Karen, too. I believe she actually read, too. And they are out of Haverhill, Mass., I believe. And Patrick Lacey out of Danvers, Massachusetts. He read as well. And you as well, Sydney. Your story from Bugs, which was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, which is one of the highest awards for the horror.
Huge honor,
Absolutely.
yes.
Yeah. It was a
Congratulations
fantastic
again.
story. Yeah, and so that went really well. We also had B.E. Scully. She read her story.
Bobby, great lady.
Yeah, exactly. Her and her sister, they do another publishing called Furlong Press out of the northwest of the U.S. And but her story was in Bugs, and she read that, which is was a really good story as well.
I had more fun at your reading than I think any other reading, and it may have been a combination of the stories as well as the personalities. Everybody really seemed to enjoy their reading when they were up there. And it was infectious. Everybody fed off each other, and it was just a lot of fun.
Actually, one other person I would want to mention, too, that read, and she was, original how she did it was Sarah Kelly, or Sarah Fowles was her maiden name, and the story was released as that, and that's in Bugs. And she had that introduction where she asked people if they wanted to be on the beach or at a bar, and then people raised their hand, and then she went into her story, and I thought that was really great how she did it. And she's out of Nashua, New Hampshire.
Gotcha.
And Sandy read David's story for him.
That's
which
right.
was pretty fun too.
That's right. David Bernstein, he's an author out of New York City. And his story was read by his significant other because he's kind of shy.
And that was a good story, too.
Yeah.
I still remember that one.
Yeah. Oh, and then Jonathan Doobie as well. He's another writer out of Berlin, and he came down with Greg and Greg Norris, and he read his story, too.
It was a fun time. It was a really good panel, as I said. Sydney's reading the what was
Baby's Breath.
Baby's Breath, but I was thinking of the panel, Midnight No,
Written
written backwards,
Oh,
I'm
the written
sorry.
backwards panel?
Was great, but your
Awesome.
reading of Baby's Breath was fantastic. It was
Thank
very, very good.
Baby's Breath is a wild story. I love, just the idea of being able to go to the readings is was just so much fun for me because it reminds me of when I was a kid and, whether it might have been you were lucky enough to have a first grade teacher or a second grade teacher who would read you a story or your parents were, nice enough to read a story or anything like that. And it harkens back to those days. And you get that now combined with the knowledge that these people and that they're working on
Oh, absolutely.
composing
yeah.
these things in a certain way. So you enjoy it, but then you learn, as you listen to these guys, you think, that's really tricky. And I love it. It's great. And
I think we all do.
Yeah.
All four of us here anyways, really enjoy
I
the
love
readings.
readings.
And just speaking of reading highlights, Tom Monte.
Oh,
my
Tom
God,
Monteleone.
Yeah.
was-
Tom Monteleone. Remember that name.
This was my first Anthocon, so for me, that was a
That was
highlight.
amazing.
That blew my mind. And the fact that I was on the panel and sitting behind the table watching him, was such an honor. And I've never seen anything like that.
What I loved about that was I was sitting to her left and Tom was sitting to my left. So it was Tom, me, and Sydney. And then it was Christopher Golden. And then after that, it
Kevin.
You
was
got a who's who of
Yeah.
Laura
Kevin
there,
and
yeah.
James.
Kevin Lucia and then
Yeah.
James Chambers. And Michael Bailey, the man behind Written Backwards, of course, he is just he's a machine.
He
He's
really
a
is.
brilliant man, amazing artist, amazing writer, and a truly, truly great guy. Really great guy. And of course, if you get a chance, folks, look up Written Backwards books. And last time we talked about Chiral Mad and Kuala Nu and Library of the Dead.
Yeah.
So he was there to present all these things, and he had so many of the writers who were there. And what was interesting was, at a certain point, James Chambers was James Chambers was reading, and then Kevin Lucia was reading, or I think it was Kevin and then James. It was Kevin and then James. And we had all been in the Borderlands Writers Boot Camp that Tom Monteleone started. And F. Paul Wilson is one of the advisors there, and Doug Winter is one of the advisors, Bram Stoker Award winners, bestsellers.
Paul was right there.
And
No, I
Paul
knew.
was sitting right in front of us listening, and great, medical doctor, amazing writer, F. Paul Wilson. And so one guy reads, and another guy reads, and as James started to read, I was like, hey, I think half of this panel is composed of people who went to this Borderlands boot camp thing, right? So Michael said that. And it was like a ratcheting up thing where every time we went to one thing, and then finally we got to Tom Monteleone, the old seasoned master.
And he proved it.
He just whacked that sucker right over the left field wall. It was insane how good his story was.
Animated, and he knew his material. I mean, it was like, a baby's breath. I mean,
was
it just
awesome.
came out so easy, and he just he killed it. He
Yeah,
just
he
nailed
Showed
it.
killed it,
us
yeah. How it's
how it's done. He showed
Absolutely.
us how to do a reading.
Yeah.
Right, and that story was the story that's in the same book that me and
Chiral Mad, too,
Gardner
yeah.
and Chiral
Right.
Mad too. And so if folks wanted to check our writing out, his story's right there, and like you said, he hit it right out of the ballpark. It was
Oh,
unbelievable.
yes.
It's called
Yeah.
When I Was.
Yeah, and that's the first time I ever met the man, as a matter
Oh,
of
he's a
fact.
great
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
Really
he's
great guy.
unbelievable talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He used to live in New Hampshire. He used to live up in New London. And I worked at a radio station up there, and I came in right after. Evidently, they had approached Tom to try to bring him in to be a host on this radio station up in New London. So
Wow.
he's a New Hampshireite guy.
He
He's
is,
down in
yeah.
Baltimore now, but he loves it, and he
Great-
was here.
Great guy.
Yeah.
So anyways, if you get a chance, go to Anticon next year. You can see the readings for yourself. You can meet some of these.
Day passes if you don't want to attend
Spend
the
the
whole
weekend.
con. Yeah.
Yeah, and we ought to mention also, although it's much more limited, as Nikon sort of was the progenitor that inspired Anthocon, and Nikon is something that happens down in Rhode Island, and that's a lot of fun.
And I was going to mention that we'll actually be doing some tapings at Nikon. We have permission to. We're still waiting to find out which ones
Nice.
we'll be taping. But those are more likely to be panels rather than readings. And the nice thing about panels is you've got the experts up there talking very knowledgeably about whatever the subject is. So it's like a meeting of the minds.
Oh, yeah.
And some great information comes from those panels, as well as some entertainment. So it should be a lot of fun. And that's in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, which is near Bristol.
Right.
Bristol, Rhode Island, at the Holiday Inn. So if you're looking to go to a con, another horror con, it's a writing con. A lot of horror authors there, a lot of fans there, but it's mostly for writers. Check out Anticon. It's the weekend of July 18th. Look it up online and give it some thought anyways. Come on down.
Yeah, it's great.
And I believe, unless it was last year, but a writer who's originally from Nashville, New Hampshire, John McElveen, I think he's getting an award at Anticon this year, isn't he?
John's a fantastic writer.
Yeah, his
And a
his new collections.
nice guy.
Oh, what a good guy.
Inflections is one of the best short story collections I've read in a while.
Inflictions,
It's
I think, right?
Inflictions,
Yeah.
yeah. What did I say?
Inflections.
Oh,
I think-
okay.
Well, that's what I heard, I'm sorry, I apologize. I
It's
just
one of
was-
the, I might have said it wrong. It's one of the best short story collections I've read in years. And it's in my top 5 of all time.
He's a
It
great
really
guy.
is good, yeah.
And he's he's just such a friendly guy. John McElveen, they call him Johnny Mac. Yeah, I think he might be doing. I don't know if he's guest of honor or if he's might be doing some of the host roasting stuff or something.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
funny
What's the
guy too.
award he's getting?
I'm not sure. I just know that he
You
was.
go to the Nikon.
He was going to be at Nikon as one of the big guests. there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and so,
Good.
so good for him.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's time now to get to our show tonight. Normally, we talk about things that are speculative or dark fiction related. We're going to change that a little bit, make the program a little more local. We've got some members here from a local writers group from the Goffstown Public Library. They're called The Blank Page. They're going to come and we're going to talk to them a little bit, and they're going to read some of their work for us. It'll give us a chance to get their feelings about writers groups. And maybe, if we're lucky, they'll tell us a little bit about how they write, what motivates them, and learn a few things. So if you ever thought about writing, if you're interested in writing, stay tuned, and we'll be talking to the members of The Blank Page. I have a special guest here from The Blank Page, the writers group that, again, meets out of the Goffstown Public Library. This is Bob Perrault. And Bob is an author of many books, and I've got a few of them here for you. This one's a postcard history series of Manchester, and he may go into it a little bit, but there's all sorts of postcards detailing different scenes in Manchester. And I'm going to screw this one up like I screwed up the last one, but this is, I think, called L'Héritage.
L'Héritage.
L'Héritage, okay. And this is a French, completely French book?
Yep, it's a novel in French,
A novel.
set in Manchester.
And then finally, the Franco-American Life and Culture in Manchester, New Hampshire. Bob is the author of this. These are all, I shouldn't say these are all, 2 of these are nonfiction and this one's fiction. I'm going to start off with a quick question with Bob, and then I'm going to let Phil handle the interview from there. The Blank Page. Can you give me just a little bit of background on how you came to, you're one of the founding members of the group.
Yeah, well, actually, the library, the Goffstown Public Library, is the founder, and they had a meeting back in 2005, September 2005, and I read about it, so I went, and I've been there ever since, except for a little hiatus, 2006 to 2008, when I went for a master's in fine arts and creative writing. So I took a break during that time, but I've been with it ever since.
So, in terms of years, it's been,
Since 2005, so
Two-
say 10
say
years
10
minus 2,
and you're still going.
and I'm still going,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm assuming the reason you're still going is you're getting something out of the group.
I'm getting a lot out of the group. Right now, I've got, well, it's actually my thesis that I wrote for the creative writing, the MFA. It's a novel, and I've been presenting chapter by chapter to the group, because when you write a novel in 2 years' time as an MFA thesis, it's all scrunched in there, and you don't really have time. You got to move from month to month, and so I just, put it in the drawer for about a couple of years, and I've been taking it out and reworking it little by little, and then presenting it to the Blank Page. And so people there are seeing things that my MFA people didn't see necessarily and
something?
helping to
Yeah.
improve it. So I think by the
Great.
time it's done, it'll be the best it can be. And then I hope to get it published.
Good, great. Okay, well, now that we got a little bit of background on Bob and his involvement in the Blank Page, I'm going to turn the interview over to Phil.
All right. I just met you tonight, Bob, and
Yeah.
I'm pleased to meet you, specifically because of who you are and what you write about. And
And fellow Frenchmen.
that's right. Well, that's the thing. I want to do my little intro that I thought up. And my name is Philippe Christophe Perron. And the reason I'm saying it the French way, the Franco way, rather than the English way, is because of who you are and what you write. And folks may not know this, but there's a large French community in New England area and Quebec French as well. And you write about the French experience, or the Quebec experience, as what Tony was telling me. And a lot of folks don't even know that, like in Massachusetts, there's more French than there's Italian. And the reason for that is because the French, it appears, they're not chest pounders. In other words, there's no cultural way that they express themselves like the Italians do with the festivals and the Irish and the Greeks and whatnot. And that's curious. And I want to know why.
Actually, they do express themselves with festivals and other things, except that they do it quietly. In fact, there was a book that came out about maybe 20 years ago in Maine called Quiet Presence, and it was about the Franco-Americans, exactly that. Don't make waves, just do your thing, and it's, a lot of our culture too is an at-home culture, you know, but there are events, there are soirees, and, you know, we, you know, sing and dance and whatever, and so, and there's a whole
You know
literature.
how to party.
We know how, oh yeah, we know how to party.
Well, you
Push-
too, Tony. You're
Just,
French.
Yeah,
just like in Canada, you, in the kitchen, push all the, because they had large kitchens on the farms, you know, you just push all the furniture over on Friday and Saturday night, and you get grandpa with the fiddle and just sing and
Great
dance
stuff,
and,
absolutely
you know,
great stuff,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Except for poutine, I mean,
Poutine,
poutine, I'm sorry.
poutine, yes, which is a heart attack on a plate.
Yeah, it
It
is.
tastes good, though. It's
It is,
fantastic.
it's good, it's hard to resist, but,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Now, I have some questions for you, and let me start with the basic one. Who is Bob?
Who is Bob? I'm also Robert. I'm Robert Perrault in French, but Bob Perreault in English. I was
If I could
born in
interject,
Manchester.
you don't go Perrault.
No, not Perrault. No, it's Perrault or Perrault.
Very good.
Yeah, like Ross Perot, but Perreault. Yeah, I grew up, I'm a native of Manchester, grew up in Manchester. Franco-American, went to parochial school, St. George Parochial School. And in our family, we always spoke French. My grandfather was president of the ACA, and my uncle was president of the ACA. That's Association Canado-Américaine, which doesn't exist anymore. And I was a librarian of their library, which is now on the campus of St. A's, where I have been teaching conversational French for 27 years.
Well,
That's how I earn my supper, and then I write
Is the supper poutine?
well, not quite.
Not
No,
every
my
night
wife, my
anyways.
wife is actually a very good cook, and she experiments quite a bit. She has Julia Child's French
So she's French too?
cookbook. Oh, yeah, we speak French at home.
Ah.
We raised our son in French, and now we're speaking French to our grandchildren.
Which is
So-
lost now as a generation, my generation.
Oh, yeah.
We've lost that ability to speak
Yes.
French.
Well, we are the same generation, you and I, but most of my friends, I think, pretty much stopped speaking French after they got out of French parochial school.
Yeah.
Whereas in my family, you couldn't do that. It was like against the rules. My grandparents, you know, they just enforced it. And, you know, I went to school in Paris later for, you know, junior year abroad when I was a student at St. A's. And I discovered there that, wow, you know, you speak another language like that, you can get around all over the place in French. And so, and then I even studied Spanish, so I can get around there too. So with those three languages, I can go all over the place and you know, be understood. So, you know.
Nice. Now, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but, and Tony did as well by introducing your books, but what do you write? Explain to the listeners.
I am a fanatic for Manchester history, so I love to write about Manchester history. And through that, I discovered the whole history of Franco-Americans, so I started writing about the Franco-Americans of New England, Manchester as well, but New England wide. And there are certain things you can say in nonfiction, but then there are certain things that you'd like to express other ways, and so I started writing fiction, and I went and got a master's in French, where instead of writing a thesis, I wrote that novel, L'Héritage, and that it had to be in French, obviously. So I do write in both languages, and I've been published in the United States, in French Canada, and in France.
Excellent,
So,
excellent.
I can tell you his nonfiction is, his fiction is just as good as his nonfiction. In fact, I actually prefer your fiction more. You're an excellent fiction writer.
thank you, because my wife, my wife is just the opposite. She doesn't like my fiction. She says, I've heard those stories over and over. I like your nonfiction. So hey, it's to each his own.
Absolutely.
But I like both, because I like going back and forth between French and English, back and forth between fiction and nonfiction. So life is always interesting.
Good. Yeah.
So,
Now, besides all the great New England writers, and of course, the Franco-American New England writers such as Jack Kerouac
Yeah.
and the Huguenot David Thoreau,
yeah.
who are your influences? Who are the authors you like, whether fiction or not? Who are your favorites?
Grace Metalius. And a lot of people don't realize that Grace Metalius was Grace de Repentigny. She was born in Manchester, not Gilmanton. She lived in Gilmanton when she wrote Peyton Place, but she was Marie Grace de Repentigny. And I'm a scholar for the New Hampshire Humanities Council, so I do a talk on her Franco-American childhood and growing up in Manchester and the influences that a lot of people don't even know about. They all read Peyton Place because that was a big sensational novel in the 1950s, very scandalous, the whole thing. Today it would be nothing, but in those days it was pretty scandalous. But she wrote a novel called No Adam in Eden, which is all about her Franco-American background growing up in Manchester, and it's something that people just don't know about. So
You still give presentations
I
on
give
this, yeah?
presentations on, in fact, I just gave one in Rye. I go all over New Hampshire giving it. And also, I give tours. I give a tour of Grace Metalius's neighborhood where she grew up and do readings along the way that, where she's describing the neighborhood or whatever. She grew up with her maternal grandmother living with the family, and they only spoke French. So Grace Metalius, like Jack Kerouac, spoke French before she ever spoke English.
Nice.
We're going to conclude the interview portion because we do have some work that you want to read for us, which
Okay.
we're very enthusiastic about. And
Sure.
we're going to give you some time for that.
Okay, this is nonfiction, and it's from that book, Franco-American Life and Culture in Manchester, New Hampshire. Vivre la différence, not vive, big difference, live the difference. It's a chapter from that book, and it's called A Tale of Two Women. During my lectures and tours dealing with Franco-Americans of Manchester, I show photographs of two women. One is seated at her spinning wheel at home. The other is standing between rows of looms in a textile mill. Together, these images evoke certain points about rural life and work in Quebec, juxtaposed with the urban industrial experience of Quebecois immigrants to such places as Manchester. I ask people to pretend that they're of the same woman before and after her migration from Quebec to Manchester. Since most Quebecois immigrants came from small cities or from villages, the lady at her spinning wheel represents a typical farming woman whose lifestyle in her homeland differs radically from what she'll face in Manchester. For generations, everyone in her village has known everyone else. With few exceptions, they're devout Catholics whose lives revolve around their faith, large family, the French language, and cultural traditions. She and her family feel a strong sense of belonging to a community of like-minded individuals. Though most live modestly, They own their own homes on their own land. They help one another in times of need, from childbirth, illness, and death, to barn raising and animal slaughtering. The farm wife labors at home, indoors and in the field, the latter with her husband and children. She works on her own terms, at her own pace, makes her own hours, often from before sunrise to long after sunset, and rests whenever she feels the need. Her environment is relatively quiet and the air is pure. Spinning is but one of her many steps in the making of clothing. She obtains wool from her sheep or harvests flax grown on her family's land. With her tools and other domestic apparatus, she transforms these raw materials into shirts, blouses, pants, dresses, sweaters, or whatever her family needs. When finished, she views these creations with a feeling of accomplishment and pride, which in turn gives her a sense of identity with her work. Although she works hard, knowing that it benefits her family gives her satisfaction. While some might see this picture as idyllic, the woman's life has its drawbacks. Despite all the time and effort she and her family put into their chores, crops can fail, animals can become ill and die, and severe weather can destroy crops and animals, not to mention dwellings. Moreover, unless one or more family members work elsewhere as a hired hand, blacksmith, or midwife, little or no money comes in. Thus, the woman and her family decide to abandon the rural agricultural atmosphere of their village in favor of a more profitable, secure life in the urban industrial setting that reigns in their adopted home, Manchester. Dwarfed by looms that surround her, the woman now inspires a new set of feelings and circumstances. We imagine what culture shock she and her family have experienced since their arrival in this busy, strange American city. Having left behind the tranquility of their Quebecois village, her family got off the train at Manchester's Union Station, where, nearby, in addition to paving stone streets filled with noisy traffic, perhaps even one of those new horseless carriages, they now see row upon row of gargantuan red brick buildings that stretch for a mile along the banks of the Merrimack River. These are the textile mills of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. Instead of owning their own home, her large family rents a tiny apartment in one of many crowded tenements in the neighborhood called Notre Dame. Perhaps members of their extended family or friends from back home live nearby. If not, at least they have, as neighbors, immigrants such as themselves who speak French and who attend Mass at St. Marie's Church. Regarding her daily routine, the woman no longer has control. A mill bell summons her to work at 6 a.m. There she labors until 6 p.m., with only a brief pause for the noon meal, which one of her children brings her from home, still warm in a dinner pail. If she's tired, she must ask permission for a break, a privilege left up to the discretion of her superiors. Most of them speak only English, that is, unless she's fortunate enough to work for a second hand, a minor boss who speaks French. This is the company's way of controlling the employees by placing them under the direction of one of their own countrymen. Most likely, she works in a weave room with other French speakers, though she might just as easily end up with immigrants who represent a mixture of languages, faiths, and customs, who must work together for the good of the company. Sometimes there is harmony, sometimes not. Unlike the quiet ambiance of the family farm, she endures an incredibly noisy weave room as the nonstop din of hundreds of looms simultaneously going click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, drowns all other sounds, makes the entire mill building tremble, and even haunts her dreams at night. This inevitably results in premature hearing loss. And forget about breathing fresh air, because a textile mill requires closed-in heat and humidity, where she inhales cotton dust that can lead to a variety of respiratory ailments. All day long, she works at that one repetitive operation. She weaves cotton owned by the company, as are the looms on which she produces not finished clothing, but mere cloth that also belongs to the company. Consequently, at the end of her workday, she has nothing tangible to bring home to show her family the fruits of her labor. Her relationship with her work and its end product has drastically changed from what it was in Quebec. But unlike on the farm, where her hard work might not have paid off, here in the mill, she's guaranteed a regular wage, however meager. She realizes that her labor earns the company a sizable profit in comparison to what she receives in her pay envelope. While she might feel exploited, she's also grateful for the security that a steady income offers. Consequently, she and her family will remain in Manchester. Thanks to the photographs of these two ladies, we have a clearer idea of life on both sides of the Canadian-US border and why so many thousands of Quebecois left their farms to settle in Manchester.
Wow, it's pretty powerful stuff. They really had it bad back then,
They certainly did,
and they were grateful for it.
yeah.
And Tom,
My wife will hate me for this, but fist pump for the French.
Well,
Vive
thank-
Quebec.
What's your wife?
She's a mix of German, Welsh, and Italian.
Okay.
thank you very much, Bob. We're going to end this segment, and we'll going to transition to a new one in just a few seconds.
And thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. We're back, and now we're going to be talking with the romance author, Jodie Hale. Jodie is a member of the Blank Page group that meets at the library with Bob and Dan and myself and a few others. And you're actually one of the newer members of the group.
Yeah, I've only been coming about a year and a half now, I think.
A year and a half. Okay, well,
Yeah, I don't-
that's a
yeah.
long time.
Yeah,
You
but
still seem like one of the newbies. I guess it's like when you move into a town,
Yeah.
you're always the newcomer, even if you've been there 20 years. You're
I
the new
guess so.
person,
But
yeah.
you've been there forever, so
Oh, okay.
a lot longer than a year and a half.
Yeah, a lot longer, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're getting something out of it because you keep
Oh
coming
yeah,
back.
I keep coming back. I'm a glutton for punishment. Yeah, I do. I try to submit as often as I can, my 8 pages or whatever that we submit. And I always get something out of it. I always get some great ideas or something that might not work or is confusing. So I go back and put those little things back to work and clean up the page, and
Well,
it works.
it's interesting because some of us send our work out to other people to critique and take a look at, and then when they bring it to the Blank Page, lo and behold, there's things that other people have missed, or
Yeah.
there's something that might spark your interest and say, oh, I want to put that in.
And I do that. I have 2 critique partners. One is in Texas and one is in Indiana. And we critique each other's work via email. And I met them through the Romance Writers Association. And I put their stuff to work on it, and then you get it after
We
that.
get it, yeah. We get the good stuff.
You get it cleaned up a lot.
Well, we're gonna let Sydney take over the interview now and go from there.
Yeah, so my first question is pretty straightforward. Just kind of wanted to know why you write romance.
I'm going to say the quick answer is that I like a happy ending, a happily ever after. I want it resolved, and I want to feel good at the end of the book for reading. And since I really love reading that style of story, it was just natural for me to go and start writing that style of story. But if you dig deeper into the book itself, into the stories, it's all about the personal journey that the characters have to take to get to that happily ever after. And that complicated story is what draws me to that genre. It's not all 50 Shades. It's not sparkly vampires and hunky men and beautiful women. There are a lot of books that have plain Janes and, just contemporary people out there working a real job and having all these social issues and family issues and other things and what they have to do to get to the point that they can have a relationship that's going to last. So that's...
Have you always written romance, or did you
I
start?
haven't always written.
Oh.
Probably right before I joined Blank Page a year and a half ago, about 6 months before that is when I actually started writing.
Wow.
I'm not one of those people who have written since they were a little girl kind of thing. I just decided, it's kind of funny because I decided, oh, I read this, I can write this, this is easy. And then it's like, oh, no, it's not.
that easy.
It's not easy at all. And so I've spent the last year and a half, 2 years studying everything about writing, point of view and grammar and plot and the emotions and everything else that goes with it. So
That's
it's,
what it takes. It sounds like you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah.
it is a lot of work. And I want to say that I belong to the Romance Writers Association and the New Hampshire chapter. We have a chapter here in New Hampshire that have a huge array of wonderful writers published, and every one of them is so helpful. You walk into the meetings and they're, we're all friends, and what are you working on? Are you having any problems? And, we bounce things off of each other. So it's great.
Yeah.
And then the RWA runs classes all the time, educational classes, and they're very, very cost effective.
That's
They're there to help you be a writer.
Great.
And it's really
You
good.
did say something interesting, that you're writing what you read as you grew up,
Yeah.
basically. Is that what happened to you also? I mean, did you read horror and did you read dark fiction growing up?
I did. I started reading horror when I was really young, but I started writing when I was really young
Did you?
too. Yeah.
See, and I didn't, I mean, I wrote, it was terrible, but I was writing. But I read horror since I was a young person also. So your
Yeah.
experience is, quite common.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is if viewers are listening to us and saying, wow, I've, loved action thrillers all my life, and I always wanted to write one. A group like the Blank Page, people like us, you can do it.
Yeah, it's never too late.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
not, it really
And-
isn't.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a
Definitely.
good example.
And you got a follow-up question.
Yeah, so as writers, we all get into the headspace of our characters and, to make them more realistic and believable. And romance is a fairly intimate and personal subject. So how do you always know how your characters will act in certain situations?
Yeah. I do a lot of homework before I write a story, and I build a picture of my characters, and I brainstorm all kinds of information about them, like not just what they look like, because while some people might think it's all about that, it's not. It's what's their background, what's their family life, how did they grow up, what shaped them to be the people they are now, where are they from, what do they want out of life, what are their little quirks and their likes and dislikes. And when you have that big picture of the character, then you know how they're going to act because you become them. I always say, you become the actress or the actor of the character. And as situations arise, and as you're writing and you think of these things to torture your characters, you know how they're going to react because you know who that person is.
Sure.
They're not going to run away screaming if there's somebody who confronts things. So there's that kind of thing. And I come up with all that. I give them a path of personal growth that they have to get through to get to their happily ever after. But then I start putting those roadblocks, and I torture them with their fears, and all the things that can go wrong will go wrong, and they have to be able to react out of that, and I have to know what that character will do to get out of it.
That's important because I think in romance, there's pretty much a set formula. Readers expect some
That's true.
conflict, and it follows a progression. And not that romance is different than horror or action, but there's a not an outline because it's a horrible thing.
But
to
there
use,
is, it really does follow a lot of the things, the Save the Cat, the 3-act premise of writing, the hero's journey writing. They follow that kind of formula. And yeah, you do expect that there's going to be, the cute meet where they meet each other. And they may hate each other, which can be conflict right there and a lot of fun, or they might like each other right off. There's a problem that they're presented, and there's a goal that they're going for, and it's not necessarily a goal of we're going to get married, because usually the goals have nothing to do. I shouldn't say usually. They usually don't have anything to do with the romance, but the romance gets them to their goal. And yeah,
Good. Well, you've got something to read for us.
I do.
Great.
I do. This is the opening to the book I'm working on. It's called Gin, You Sin, which is actually a play on drinking. With whiskey, you get frisky, and with gin, you sin. And so that's where that comes from. And that comes out later in the book, but that's where the title comes from. And I think I'll just get right into it so you'll get the idea of what the story is about. Without warning, Michael Donovan's body dissolved. Seconds later, he rematerialized and did an inventory. Head, arms, legs, dick. He breathed a sigh of relief. 1,000 successful transports, and he still didn't trust all his parts would make it. At least he had on clothes this time. Even though he was a poor imitation of a djinn, Michael had a job to do. Please the client, put on a show, grant their wish. Fulfillment failure brought on the master's wrath. When that happened, the master had a tendency to lop off body parts, hands being his favorite. He rubbed his right wrist. He had totally freaked out the first time the master punished him. He hadn't known the effects of the waiting room would allow his hand to grow back. The regeneration hurt like a son of a bitch, but he'd take the risk again if freedom from the master were the result. Showtime. I am the great and magnificent djinn, Michael boomed. A trail of blue smoke led to a pristine vacuum cleaner tucked into the corner. You have got to be kidding me. Why couldn't it be a lamp or a bottle? How would he impress his summoner when he came out of a thing best known for its suction? He readied his best Oz voice. Of the Hoover upright. He struck a pose, fists on his hips and feet spread wide. Suck it, Aladdin. Your wish is my command. He held the pose, stared at nothing in particular, and waited. And waited. Oh, come on, you must know what you want. He relaxed his stance. Just spit it out and no one was there. He lifted a brow. That's a first. Usually when he materialized, his summoner spoke a request within seconds. Boom, wish granted, and he flashed back to the waiting room. How the hell did he end up here? No one stood ready to ask for a pile of cash, a fast, sporty car, or his personal favorite, more wishes. Yeah, that wish queued up a sound like a car engine sputtering and stalling. So sorry, try again. Where was he this time? Hell, where was he in time? Michael did a quick survey of the room's furnishings. Sofa, chair, coffee table, and desk with a computer. One doorway led to the kitchen, and a hallway led to some other rooms. Indoors. He let out a breath. Indoors was good. Not much of a chance for flying arrows or snakes here. Last time, he materialized in the Amazon rainforest looking directly at a huge snake. Granted, it was only about 10 feet away in a tree, but the damn thing was way too close for comfort. A shiver ran through him, and he shook himself. Friggin' hate snakes. At least the guy who had summoned him didn't waste any time getting to the old I'll wish for, and they were off to the races. He had flashed out of there before Monty Python could slither up for a "Hi, how are ya?" He breathed in deep. The aroma of cinnamon and coffee nearly made him giddy. He hadn't had coffee in 2 centuries, and he could almost taste that rich flavor. Stop it. You'll make yourself crazy. Again. The living room had a nice flat-screen TV, though a bit small by his standards. An Afghan on the back of the floral print sofa looked like the colorful blankets Gran had made. The coffee and fresh-baked cinnamon bun scent came from the kitchen, adding to the homey feel. He spied a mug of coffee on a cluttered desk. A curl of steam rose from the liquid, a sip. Maybe he could snag a sip before he was jettisoned back to his own personal hell. Aside from the desk, he would have characterized the room as clean and organized. Nice to know the homeowner wasn't a total neat freak. He looked at photos scattered around the room on walls and on shelves. The same woman appeared in most of the images where people laughed and mugged for the camera. Glasses hid her eyes. Her shoulder-length brown hair curled untamed around her face. Loose-fitting clothes gave no clue to what lay beneath. Her smile lit her face, her affection for others in the photo apparent. His parents wore forced expressions of happiness in their photos. The unknown woman's smile was a gift he had never received from any of his family, with the sole exception of Gran. The coffee table held issues of Scientific American, Doctor Who, Smithsonian, People, and the Seaport Herald displayed in neat rows. He picked up the Herald. Seaport was 50 miles north of his home in Boston and the largest town along the short New Hampshire coastline. He brushed his thumb across the newsprint. April 1st, April Fool's Day. The master yanked his leash all over time, always in the past or future. But this was cruel, even for that jerk. The master had sent him home. Okay, not his penthouse apartment, but 50 miles was close enough. He held the newspaper to his chest. Though through some time travel magic only the master controlled, he was back in the same year he had left. 3 calendar days ago, he was human. 200 time-traveling years later, he didn't know what he was. And once he granted a wish, he may not see home again for another hiccup. Michael jerked his head toward the sound. Felicity Sheridan slapped her hand over her mouth and held her breath. Please, please, don't let him hear me. She had ducked under the desk after a man walked out of the crazy blue smoke from her vacuum. A head peered over her hiding place, and she let out a startled squeak. There you are. His blonde hair hung into golden eyes. What are you doing back there? He smiled, and those eyes crinkled at the corners. Holy shitoli, the man was a Greek god. Aside from those beautiful eyes, and they were beautiful, with long lashes most women would kill for, he had the beard scruff that had become something women swooned over. She never saw the point, that is until Thor, mixing your mythologies, Felicity, stood in front of her in all his lovely scruffiness, with a smile that did melty things to her knees. She nudged her glasses a little higher along her nose and stood on those shaky knees, keeping the desk between them, because everybody knows a desk would keep her safe. How did you get in here? Didn't you see me come in? It's the best part. Those amber eyes crinkled again. A bit of smoke from your vacuum, and then poof, here I am. He posed with fists on his hips. What do you think? Maybe he was delusional. Did her neighbors have anyone visiting? Any minute there would be a knock at her door with someone looking for crazy cousin Petey. A gorgeous man appears. Wait, poofs from her vacuum cleaner. She wasn't buying his story. It made no logical sense. Felicity didn't dare take her eyes off him while she patted her desk. Dematerialization and transference are against the laws of physics. Her fingers closed around a letter opener. So let's try this again. How did you get here? He leaned in and winked. Magic. That's it. You're nuts. She aimed the letter opener like a dagger. I'm calling 911. And then she found herself seated on the sofa, the letter opener gone. She glanced at her desk and back to where she sat. How the hell? Listen, Felicity, you summoned me. Dark trousers skimmed along muscular legs as he paced. The perfect fit hugged him in all the best places. She bet they were not off the rack. Had to be Armani or custom made. Focus. Now's not the time for fashion commentary. I poof in, grant your wish, then poof back out. You're happy and I'm gone. Get it? She crossed her arms and stared at the coffee table. Today's Herald stared back at her and she smiled. Of course, that had to be it. Who put you up to this? Crystal? No, not her style. Had to be Suzanne. She spends the entire year planning April Fool's jokes. She wondered if a genie visited Crystal too. Felicity stood, took the man by the arm, and led him toward the door. Tell Suzanne it worked great. You had me going for a while, but I have a lot of work to do, so... She opened the door and pushed him out. Bye-bye. And then she found herself on the sofa again. What the hell? Yeah, that would be the magic again. He sat on a chair, shoes crossed on the coffee table, thumbing through People. His feet hit the floor as he tossed the magazine on the table. He pointed a finger. You called me here. I can't go anywhere until you tell me what you want. He leaned back, smiled, and held both hands out, palms up. Your wish is my command.
A vacuum cleaner. Genie out of a vacuum cleaner.
Genie out of a vacuum cleaner.
That was
Yeah.
great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
Oh, it was our pleasure.
Yep, a lot of fun.